The greatest of all the accomplishments of the ancients was learning to navigate the sharp edge of space-time. To understand singularities, the ancients had to reach beyond the realm of the certain, into the heart of the uncertain. They discovered what lay where definitions fail, when causes become incomprehensible, and what is left when all things compress into one infinite moment. At that nexus of all that is, all that was, and all that will be, no force holds sway over another. At that junction, the traveler must make a choice. Where will they go? Which gravities, matters, and energies will prevail? What state will they enter? And from that decision, a destination is derived. Slits on a screen, patterns on a wall. When the celestial horizon is reached, the traveler is observed and observes itself. And from that observation, the traveler finds either oblivion in its many forms and with its many faces, or a passageway that will lead them to dwell amongst the stars.
"6 minutes from where the body of the Hypatian fleet now rested, awaiting the arrival of the Venati, the 3 wounded Cyprian vessels took shelter in the shadow of the gate station. 3 months ago, once their long journey from their own gate had come to an end, Captain Concio permitted the establishment of an inter-ship network. This allowed the refugees they carried to have contact with each other, even across vessels. It helped with morale. Esports competition were frequent between the Perilodoff, Rosadonok, and Fainspar. A theatre production in the primary mess hall of Perilodoff was live-streamed. School classes were able to be held once more, but now that network was turning into a fatal liability for the fleet's commanders.
In thinly veiled messages, with just enough word substitution to get around the filters and moderation systems, isolated groups begin to converse frankly about the situation. And the rhetoric slowly, but steadily, escalates.
How many dead already? How many more must die? Could we not have prevailed if... Should the acting captain not have... Who are these strangers? What will they do to us, to our children, to our heritage, to our way of life? Why do we not have a say in this? What can be done about it? Who can do anything about it? What are we going to do about it?
It's been an hour since Colonel Vassan von Dariel sent his message to the crew of the Solstice, asking them to return the missing explosive devices. 5 hours remain until the Venati ships reach effective weapons range. Alice is finishing her integration with the Hypatian fleet.
Thomas Saberhagen tells Commander Tesella Lamoureux that he's feeling a little unwell and gets permission to leave the bridge. His plan is to grab something to drink and then rest a bit in his room.
We're fortunate to have a recording of this exchange between Thomas Saberhagen and Vassan von Dariel, when the latter ran into the former in the officers' lounge.
I didn't expect to find you in here.
Sorry, Captain, if that's a problem.
Please.
The commander...
It's Vassan, not Captain. And it's not a problem. You looking for something to drink?
I've got some water.
You doing all right, Thomas?
Oh, yeah, just... I mean, it got really tense there on the bridge after Alice turned on. I figured I'd excuse myself for a bit.
Tass certainly has a lot of strong feelings about Alice. Talking to her is a worst-case scenario, really.
Tass?
Tesella, Commander Lamoureux.
Ah.
I should be heading up there right now to bail her out.
What's the history there?
Tesella has some past dealings with Alice that she's trying to distance herself from. Beyond that, it's not really my place to say, though.
I can appreciate that.
Before I go, Thomas, are you adjusting to things all right?
I mean, my left hand is still partially numb from being frozen. I think it's getting worse, actually. I don't know. We've got to check up with our doctor in an hour or two, so I'll have them take a look at it.
Doesn't seem to have bothered you while playing that violin of yours for the crew earlier. I heard nothing but great things from people.
Between you and me, it's pretty obvious that none of your people have heard a real violin before. I was pretty terrible. Just don't tell them that one, okay? It's easy to be impressive when nobody has any expectations.
Things certainly do get harder when you've got a reputation.
If I can guess, the bad guys say, oh no, it's Vasan instead of, who is this fool, right?
Well, not only that, but there are a whole ton of new bad guys. Reporters and politicians.
Oh yeah, I never know what to do with them.
For me, looking down the lens of a camera feels just like looking down the barrel of a gun. I'll say at least you sure handle yourself well when they've got cameras shoved in your face.
You know what they say about practice?
Can't say I do.
It's, there's the saying. Never mind.
Right. Where are you heading next? Back to the bridge?
Oh, no. I was going to spend a bit of time in my quarters. Quieter there. I just have a lot on my mind, I guess.
What do you have on your mind?
Well, I mean, we've got 2 missing breaching charges. Are you worried about those?
I'm trying not to think about that. Really. You've got another hour for somebody to turn it in.
You think they will?
I certainly hope so. The team I know, well, we wouldn't even be asking this question in the first place. But I'm trying to believe in people here. It's paid off for me before. It takes trust when bullets are flying both ways, you know? Hey, Thomas, look. I've dealt with a lot of new crew in my time. I've learned to recognize the spaced look in the eyes of the ones who aren't doing so well. You're not just anxious about the bombs. What's going on in that smart head of yours?
Oh, nothing, Captain. I think I'm just still getting used to being on a ship with a schedule like the commander makes us keep to.
Please, it's Vasan. Your crew now, so first names, remember?
Oh, sure.
But if you'd prefer something other than Thomas, we can call you Saber.
No. Thomas is great. Thank you, sir. Vasan, if you'll excuse me.
Nah, hold up. What's floating around in your head?
The wormhole, Earth, the Cyprians, the drones. I think about talking to Alice and the interviews I did in the museum, a lot about the museum, and what Hollis would have thought, and engineering, and whatever is coming towards us, and just wrapping my head around it all. But it's none of those things, and all of those things, and I don't know what it is. But this isn't my first complicated situation. If I can get 2 doctorates, I can handle some talk show hosts, you know? Don't worry about me. I'll figure this all out.
You see this here scarf I wear?
Yeah?
Lost my old one in a firefight. It was my favorite, this gunmetal gray color. I was helping capture a ship late last year. One of my people got hit in the thigh, a Private Fossum. So I took my scarf, made a tourniquet, and sent her back to the shuttle to wait. There was a med team waiting there, and I didn't want her slowing us down as we tried to ride our momentum up and towards the bridge. Well, like with every boarding party, there's this battle going on outside, and an Allied fighter takes some flak and crashes into the shuttle bay, killing Private Fossum, the 4 members of our med team, and 2 of our pilots. When it's all over, we've captured the ship, battle's won, we get back to our ship, and there's this reporter there. You see, by that point, they've all learned to recognize me. And this one ambushes me in the hallway after the debriefing. Rook, that's how the media knew me back then. Rook, what are your thoughts on today's awesome victory? And I'm just struck. I just got done reporting about the 7 kids who died in the fighter crash, and the 4 who died of the assaults, and the 6 that got life-changing injuries, and there's this slicked-up reporter rattling on about awesome victory. My mind just unplugs itself, and I stutter out the only words that I've got. Well, I'm a bit upset that I lost my scarf. Can you believe that? Look up a video of it sometime. The look on my face is hilarious. So this reporter takes that line and makes a header out of it, and it goes all over the place. Next time I'm in public, this guy comes up to me, says, "I wanted to thank you for what you did that day on that ship, for fighting for all of us. It must not be easy. It isn't much, but I made you this scarf to replace the one you lost." And that's this one right here. Really nice, isn't it? Handmade, if you'd believe.
It's not your fault. What happened to them?
Oh, I'm well aware. That's war. No, I just wear this scarf to keep remembering that moment with the reporter. That idle words have a lot of power now. That without intending to, I took the sacrifice of 17 people's lives and made it about myself.
I bet you hated the headlines.
How do you mean?
Having to relive that moment again and again, face it every day?
I wouldn't say so. They have their purpose. We needed public support if we were going to win that war. We needed it badly. I just happened to give them some really great ammunition for that. Do I wish it could have been something else? Why, yes, I do. Some people may interpret those words to mean that I don't care about my crews. But would I undo it all? I don't think so. Sometimes people have to be stories. For those 17, at least the story got to be that they and their units were capable. Is there a better way to honor them? Absolutely. Well, this was something. And it meant something to somebody. It meant enough that they'd go out of their way to make an oversized scarf for a total stranger. And well, that's the kind of system I want to live in. This scarf is a reminder that bullets fly both ways for those trying to get there. Should I have said that? Should I have said something else? Is the disrespect okay in the end because it wound up out into a good cause? Was it even a good cause? I don't know.
That's hard.
Sure is. But it's what's in the hold, so it's what I have to work with. Things like those heart seekers, ships and gunfights and battle tactics, I can handle those situations. But I reckon I'm just as scared about talking to people and managing the memories and the stories as you are about wormholes. But I try to do the right thing. It's done me pretty well so far, helps me get through the messy moments. Like anytime I disagree with a command decision, or see people starting to walk away from the dreams that started this all. Maybe one day I'll figure out how to balance the needs of the battle with the needs of the war, like they say in command school.
If I may, sir, just a thought. As somebody who has watched people just try to do the right thing, well, idealists die from broken hearts and wind up with nothing but a clear conscience. If you just follow right from wrong long enough, they both get really fuzzy. They'll overlap and change sides, and you'll not know which is which anymore. A sense of right and wrong isn't always going to be good enough. You're going to need more than that, something to guide you. Otherwise, you'll wake up one day and understand why some people cycle an airlock while still inside it. You'll have done everything right, but wound up with nothing in return.
Well, thank you for the heads up, Thomas. I appreciate it. What guides you?
It was Hollis for so long now, but I don't recognize what they've done to her since I went to sleep.
May you find a suitable replacement sooner rather than later then. I don't want to hear one day that you've gone and cycled an airlock and all that.
Thank you for the story about the scarf.
You got that right. Another story. I hope it was a useful one.
If you'll excuse me, Captain Basan.
Of course.
Thank you again.
Hey. Good luck, Thomas.
Thank you.
Another hour passes, just 4 more until the Venati ship arrive. Vasan returns to the bridge and his fears are confirmed. Nobody comes forward with the missing explosive devices.
So he gives the order. The whole ship is put in lockdown, and Commander Lamoureux and the security team conduct a room-by-room sweep for the missing explosives. They don't announce what the lockdown is for, lest they scare the culprits into doing something rash. But anybody who knows what's going on or was paying attention to the captain's speech can probably guess the reason. It'll take them 2.5 hours to do even a basic sweep of the ship. Alexandria Quill spends that time in the exact same position, surrounded by monitors and swapping between 2 different keyboards as she combs Solstice's systems for any clues or hints about who the conspirators may be.
Tesella has brought her second favorite weapon, a love lock pistol, similar to the one that Vasan keeps on his thigh. Her first favorite was a gift from Alice many years before, and remains strapped to the bottom of her chair on the bridge. She hadn't wanted to move it, lest Alice note where it was, or worse, note that Tesella still had it. She hated how good it was, how perfectly it fit in her palm, how it sang with each pull of the trigger, how her fingers could still remember its gentle textures. You see, Alice had made the work of death a sensual joy. And her gift was not only the most effective instrument Tesella had ever used, it was an experience. She hated how much she loved it.
3 security officers accompanied her, each decked in ballistic plate and carrying weapons of their own. The process is simple, almost rehearsed. One checks high, one checks low, another searches under any easily accessible wall panels or floor plates, and Tesella stares down whoever's in the room. They communicate with subtle hand gestures. The commander indicates how thorough they need to be based on her evaluation of the room and the crew who have access to it. The crew who aren't on edge before notice that their first officer is armed. The quiet tension grows palpable over the course of the search.
Throughout the 2.5-hour search period, Vasan is on the bridge alone with Alice, talking through strategies, priorities, and tactics for the upcoming engagement. He doesn't explain to Alice why they're in lockdown, and she pretends not to have already figured it out by this point. Vasan is notified that the search is complete with a brief message from his first officer. Checked everywhere somebody new would think to stash something. No breaching charges. I think at least one of our conspirators has been with us for a while.
I wish we knew what Vasan's response was, but at least we know what was probably on his mind as they prepared for combat. When were those missing explosives going to show up? Hopefully, they find out before they detonate.
Alice thinks the missing breaching charges are intriguing, certainly, but her access to the internal network is still very limited, and her window of opportunity is very small. While everybody else was distracted and isolated, and while Vasan thought he had her complete attention while going over combat protocols, she wiggled her way into the projector system of Thomas's quarters, tapped into the communication panel next to the door, and watched him for a moment through the cameras. It was much easier to work with him when he was alone.
Hey, Thomas.
Yes?
Hello. It's Alice.
Aren't you not?
Yes, the commander would be very cross, but I'm talking with the captain right now, and he wants to make sure all of his crew are okay. So I've got the permissions to chat for just a little bit, if you'd like. Can I come in? I'm not interrupting anything, am I?
Sure.
Alice renders herself into space, as if she had just walked through the door. She's dressed just as she was up on the bridge, a weary smile painted on her face.
Long day?
Quite. They have me helping the fleet now, as you heard, and it's just a lot of ships and telescopes and weapons to track and manage, and I'm a little nervous about the engagement later.
I can imagine. That's a lot of responsibility.
Thomas is standing, awkwardly, hesitating as if to receive her, but she's made of nothing but light and artifice.
It's my duty as a member of the fleet. I'm going to give it my best, and hopefully that's good enough. Mind if I sit? The commander has given me no respite while I'm on the bridge.
Of course.
Alice sits on the floor. Hollis mentioned doing that with Thomas in one of her journals, their go-to spot for the more serious conversations they'd need to have. Alice takes off her boots, and then her socks, and then tosses both to the side, wiggling her toes like they're just getting air for the first time that day, and then tucks her legs up underneath her and fans her dress out around her.
You can have the chair, or you can sit on the bed.
Oh, thank you, but I much prefer it down here. You can sit up there if you'd like, though.
If Thomas actually does sit on the bed, she'll find an excuse to move up by him. Fortunately for her, he doesn't. He instead sinks down to the floor and sits with his knees up and his back to the wall. There's 1.5 meters between them.
Nah, that's okay. I don't mind it down here either. This may be a rude question, but have you been programmed to get tired?
No, not rude at all. That's a fair question. The answer is yes and no. How technical of an explanation would you like?
Let's say medium-low.
In the moment, especially because I'm performing official military functions, no, I'm not tired. But that instance of me forms the baseline for my next interaction I have with anybody who knows about it. Right as I load up a new instance, I remember how the person there last knew me to be, and I adapt myself to the social dynamics of the present. So, in this instant, I wasn't tired on the bridge, but because I'm now in a more casual setting with a friend, I suddenly feel the full weight of being on my feet for the last 2 hours in boots that are maybe a little too big for me.
Fascinating. So your states, your reactions, your feelings, they're all genuine, if not timely.
That's not a bad summary. I could say the same thing about you. All genuine, if not timely.
Well, that's kind of you to say.
Are you okay?
Well, sure.
Thomas, you can be honest. There aren't any cameras here to perform for.
I think I'm really angry, Alice.
Why is that?
Let's see how good you are at empathy. What would you say? Why am I angry?
Alice runs through all of the data that she has access to. Every interview he gave, every conversation they had, everything Thomas has done in the last 2 hours she has been booted up. All of his interactions on his phone, his files, what things he clicked on, what sites and locations he visited, and scraped recordings whenever people of note were talking about him. She picks a wrong answer at first, just to set him a bit more at ease.
Let me guess. Did you break a string on your violin?
Not quite.
Then it probably has something to do with Hollis.
Okay, what about her?
You've been so busy up until now with all the interviews and appearances and meetings that you haven't had the time to just think and process. Not really. And now you are less, how shall I say, front and center? And you've really started to feel everything you've been thinking about for the past, almost 4 months? And it makes you angry.
You just guessed based off of the 5 stages of grief.
No. Though the Kubler-Ross model is useful, that guess was based on my interactions with you, not on introductory psychology. Am I wrong?
They destroyed her, Alice. This all destroyed her entirely. And then they took her memory and destroyed that over and over again. I saw the videos she made, watched her grow old, addressed many of them to me even, and by the end of her heroics in the Ark, I didn't recognize her. At first I thought I had brain damage or something, like maybe my memories had been messed up because I literally could not see Hollis. The Hollis I knew in those videos. Then I looked at some old pictures of us and I recognized her there, but after the Ark, it's not just that she didn't bother doing her hair anymore. No, there's no light in her eyes, no gentle smile, no goofy wiggles, no snarky comments under her breath. And then they tell me she was heroic, that she bravely did whatever, and that she willingly did this, and that she boldly did that. And the rotten commissioners used her to encourage submission, and Duval used her to encourage revolution. And she's an action star and a cartoon character and a master engineer, and that's the funny one. She wasn't amazing. She was decent enough, better than me, sure, she did it professionally. But there were better choices on the crew if merit was the marker, other people they could have woken up. She was competent. Nobody would say more than that. She just got picked because of the chain of command, and now she's got a Riking off-brand toolset named after her, and I mean, it's actually appropriate. Guess his job done well enough. But they don't know that. The manufacturers, they think it's a compliment, gives them clout. I see impressions of Hollis everywhere, but nothing that actually remembers her, or represents her, or is tied to her in any way. Not really.
Who is it you're angry with?
I'm not really upset at any of them. Even the ones who don't mean well, who use her cynically or manipulatively. I mean, I can't blame them. It's their heritage, their history, their culture.
Do you believe in a higher power?
I do.
Are you angry at it?
Maybe? Not really. They didn't do this.
So, you're angry at whoever is responsible for it happening. Is it the head of the original GNA? Or the person who plotted the wormhole jump that led to the damage to the Ark?
No, it's not their fault.
Then whose fault is it?
I don't know. I think I'm angry because I can see the same thing happening to me. And I'm scared. I'm angry that I'm scared, that I'm going to wind up empty and dead.
That's an awful place to be.
It's just like I can feel this massive emptiness. Like it's lurking just out of sight and it's coming. And any second now it's going to show up. And when it does, and it's been here before. I faced it before. Right when I woke up and I heard what happened and I lost everything. And it didn't finish me off then. And it might finish me off this next time. Or worse, it may not. And I'll have to keep living like this with nothing but the question of why am I not dead yet? And the dread of the next time the nothingness hits, because somehow it always gets worse. Until there's nothing left of me. And my memory is dragged around and thrown around for whoever wants to use it for whatever they're trying to sell that day.
This was Alice's greatest shortcoming. She had no physical form. Sure, she had all manner of simulacra, approximations, and imitations, but they were never sufficient. Not for moments like these. Thomas needed a hug, a touch, a moment of physical affirmation. She knew it, and she wanted so desperately to give it to him. But all she had here were ephemeral words. Words that would forever remain inadequate.
I'm so sorry you're dealing with all of this, Thomas. I wish I could do or say something that would help, but there's nothing to be said. All I can think of are empty platitudes. I just want you to know that I think you're remarkable. I genuinely see you as a friend. I would be quite distraught if something were to happen to you. Just know that I'm here. And I know that's not enough, but I'm here. I'll be doing what I can to try and help you as you face this. If you haven't brought this up with your therapist yet, well, they're professionals for a reason. They can help. And if they're not helping, let's find you a new one, yeah? But we have options. There are ways forward. Things aren't going to feel like this forever.
Thanks, Alice. Would you just sit with me until you have to go?
Of course.
Alice remained as long as she thought she could get away with it. After a few minutes, Thomas played a little on his violin, and Alice sat in silence, just enjoying the strings, the simple melodies. And then, as the search for the explosive devices was proving unfruitful, and Tesella's attention began to return to what was happening on the bridge, Alice gently excused herself, pulled her boots back on, and slipped away.
20 minutes remain until the Venati ships enter effective weapons range.
53 minutes to go.
A call is sent to all decks to report to battle stations. It's a redundant announcement. Everybody has been there for 2 hours.
15 minutes to effective weapons range.
48 minutes to go.
The preparations are complete. Weapons are loaded, evasive maneuvers plotted, reactors at optimal efficiency. All that's left to do is wait.
10 minutes to effective weapons range.
43 minutes to go.
For the last 4 hours, the HGV Heavy Hand of Providence has attempted to contact the approaching ships, reaching out across every frequency in case whoever or whatever operated those vessels wanted to communicate, to explain themselves, to present themselves, to turn back before they faced the might of the First Hypatian Expeditionary Fleet. They never answered.
9 minutes and 35 seconds to effective weapons range. The HGV Centurion is the first to report a change in their infrared scopes. It could be a new velocity, weapons activation, or something else entirely. 2 minutes later, triangulating data from 4 separate vessels, Alice announces she's confirmed 4 new objects accelerating towards them. Missiles of some sort.
39 minutes and 18 seconds to go.
The grim reality of their situation begins to set in. Missiles are usually reserved for close ranges, for they're especially easy to locate and destroy. Long-range attacks typically come from your railguns. Their projectiles are extremely difficult to locate as they burn no fuel, but it's easy to know when to start looking for one. The railguns take a lot of power to operate. Yet these enemies had opened with missiles in addition to potentially firing their railguns. How much fuel can they afford to waste?
The reality is that the 2 dark vessels, embodiments of the emptiness and savagery of the void itself, simply could not be contained any longer. The Voidcaller had been inside effective range for what felt like an eternity to its incomprehensible mind. It had restrained itself in hopes that its prey would show their hand and fire. But the prey waited too long. Now their might no longer mattered. They were insignificant compared to the Voidcaller. The nightmare incarnate indulged itself in the opening notes of a silent symphony of death.
The Venati reach effective weapons range.
33 minutes to go.
It takes 20 minutes for a Hypatian railgun to reach its target at maximum effective range, provided their target isn't moving towards them, which shortens that time. The Venati missiles, usually the slowest of the ship-mounted weapons, could cross that same distance in only 12 minutes and 27 seconds. Their railgun projectiles would initially travel at a much higher velocity than the missiles, but their acceleration was 0 as soon as they left the barrel. The missiles had not stopped accelerating since they had first been detected, so it was possible that they would outpace the railguns. But the Hypatians had very little data to estimate those velocities with. Locating the railgun projectiles would be very, very difficult.
What does all of this mean? It means that by the time the Hypatians could return fire, they had 4 missiles and 2 tungsten rods the size of elephants hurtling towards them at unmatchable speeds. And they had no idea when or where those elephants would blow through their ships.
One by one, the railguns on the Hypatian ships lit up and then went dark, their energy silently crackling out into the void as they lobbed their projectiles towards the enemy.
Every captain orders their ship into evasive maneuvers. Engines burn and the vessels throw themselves in a random direction. The hope is that they can get out of the path of whatever tungsten rod may be on its way to them.
Bloodlust fills the empty space. This first volley was also a test, a formal evaluation of these ships' response times and capabilities, and the results were almost disappointingly bad. The Venati casually calculate tiny changes in their courses. They'll easily evade these pathetic Hypatian rail guns. No need to even activate their batteries.
5 minutes have passed since the Hypatians returned fire.
A second volley is released, railguns crackling with energy.
The Venati missiles will impact in 6 minutes if they're not intercepted.
15 minutes, 33 seconds to go.
General Duval orders the entire fleet to accelerate forward. In the face of total technical superiority, the only chance they have is to level the playing field. The Hypatian fleet surges forward to close the gap. It's a bold gamble. Their goal is to deal damage to the enemy ships before their entire fleet is decimated. This battle must be won quickly.
Fighter squadrons power on and wait to be accelerated into the darkness. Their call will come at any moment.
13 minutes to go.
Still, no glimpses of the tungsten rods. Every passing second narrows the search field, but every passing second cuts their response time.
I was told that most conflict in space is agonizingly slow, with 10, 20, 30 minutes between any action you take and the confirmation of whether it worked or not. Space is big. It takes time to sling rocks at each other. It takes time to move. They said that a lot of battle would involve just sitting and directing the computers as they performed billions of calculations and whatnot. Lots of waiting. Lots of patience, Basan said. It didn't feel slow. Even after the initial adrenaline worn off, I felt like we were burning through time, just like we were burning through fuel, and never even knowing who it was that was trying to blast us into the void.
The small ships closest to their enemy, Solstice, Rainwalker, and Frosted Veil, enter weapons range of the missiles. Their defensive batteries roar to life, each attempting to shoot down the spiraling projectiles. But they're still far away and easily readjust their courses around the flak. The other ships stand ready. They will need to deal with whatever their escorts aren't able to intercept.
12 minutes to go.
The missiles will impact in 3 minutes. Each one selects a final target. 2 head for the Centurion, the missile cruiser who will most easily damage the Venati ships when they draw closer. 1 swings for Frosted Veil, for this has the best angle to shoot down future attacks. The 4th selects the hardest target to get to, Heavy Hand of Providence. It sits at the center of the Hypatian formation, the king piece of their forces. This missile will test the heart of their defenses.
11 minutes to go.
The missiles are traveling impossibly fast and changing their acceleration every 5 seconds. Firing solutions are rendered obsolete before the defensive systems can even lock them in.
Esprit de Corps relays that the 2 enemy vessels have fired railguns again.
There's still no sign of the first 2 tungsten rods.
10 minutes and 30 seconds remain.
Frosted Veil shoots down the missile that's almost upon them.
Solstice destroys one of the 2 heading towards Centurion. Its point defense systems dump new rounds into their barrels as they swivel towards the next closest missile.
10 minutes remain.
Last Ray of Twilight destroys the missile pushing into the center of their formation. There's still no sign of the railgun shots. The 1 remaining missile burns towards Centurion.
The Hypatian ships fire a 3rd volley of tungsten rods towards the enemy vessels. The first volley still hasn't reached its targets.
Rainwalker finds one of the missing tungsten rods. There's no time to celebrate. It's only 3 minutes out from Heavy Hand of Providence. Even with the Heavy Hand's best effort at changing their positioning since the Venati first fired, the rod is still lined up for their vessel. The Venati predicted correctly which way the ship would try to evade. That doesn't bode well for the rest of the fleet. Unless somebody can find the other soon, one of them will be getting a nasty surprise in less than 3 minutes.
9 minutes 28 seconds remain.
Centurion fires 8 defensive rounds from its port side batteries. The 6th of them hits the 4th and the final missile. Only 28 seconds to spare.
The last of the tiny, hateful lights goes out with a flash.
9 minutes 23 seconds remain.
Every time something like this begins, I worry that I won't be able to get the rhythm of it. The whole engagement has this odd pulse, like we're all experiencing the same cardiac arrest. But it always comes. You learn to anticipate the beats. You can feel them rolling towards you. Some new information, something is intercepted, tactics change. It could be anything. The awful part is that sometimes you know that a pulse is about to pass over you, and then it doesn't. And 15 seconds later, you hear that some other ship got hit, that a fighter is lost, that a shuttle is blown apart. And you were right, you had the pulse, but it didn't hit you this time. And it throws you off. I've been in over a dozen engagements, though none of them have occurred on a scale like this one. I couldn't find the pulse. I couldn't make sense of how the battle was flowing. Was it because Alice was there? Was she just throwing me off, or was she breaking the rhythm?
Alice calculates the velocity of the 1 rod they have located, compares it to the velocities of the Hypatian and the Venati ships, and makes a grim announcement. The 2nd volley of enemy railgun fire will be here in just over 8 minutes. Their targets are unknown.
All eyes search for the 2nd tungsten rod. Each captain was wondering if their ship was the one selected for the first wave of destruction.
The 1st volley of Hypatian fire fails to find its mark.
The Cyprian ships map the battery placement on the enemy vessels, identifying the positions that will be least protected by their defensive systems. Attack vectors are calculated and transmitted to each vessel, which redistributes the plans to the fighters and the strike craft that wait to be unleashed. 8 minutes remain.
The two fleets race towards each other, every passing second shearing off precious response time. Soon, there will be no space for thought.
Alice controls more than 24 batteries within firing range of the tungsten rod that is bearing down on the heavy hand. But which of them can hit it in time? Just to be safe, she directs 5 different batteries across the 3 different vessels to try and blast the rod into dust.
The sensor officers frantically attempt to locate the 3 rods they're still missing.
22 seconds later, just 1 minute, 8 seconds away from impact, Dorsal Battery 4 of Heavy Hand of Providence gets a lucky hit. The one rod they found so far is destroyed. Heavy Hand is safe, for now.
Only 7 minutes, 16 seconds left.
Solstice detects the second rod only as it sails past them and harmlessly into the void beyond. It had originally been lined up for their position at the front of the formation. Vassan was probably very glad his ship was small and maneuverable.
For the first time, the defensive arrays on the Venauti ships awaken to defend their horrid master. The second volley of Hypatian railgun fire is either evaded entirely or snatched out of the air by dark clouds of burning steel.
Both sides had survived the opening moves of this engagement. Each of them would have to contend with the next inbound wave of tungsten rods in less than a minute.
Alice gently notifies each of the ships that they've gotten close enough.
General Duval gives the order to scramble fighters. Seconds later, over 140 strike craft launch from the bellies of the Hypatian ships.
Like metallic hummingbirds, the fighters are thrown from the launch bays of each of the larger Hypatian vessels, one right after another.
Exactly simultaneously, the 2 Venati ships release 60 fighters of their own.
They dart in every direction, like a swarm of tropical spiders, leaping from the trees to snatch the birds out of the air.
A new volley of missiles accompany the strike craft, but these don't behave like the ones that opened this conflict. Solstice is first to figure out the difference. These projectiles are teardrop-shaped. Heartseeker drones, 20 of them, and only 4 minutes away.
And then the battle begins in earnest. 6 minutes and 30 seconds remain.
I've seen a lot of combat. Most of my attention was spent directing the crew, prioritizing targets. But I remember 2 distinct thoughts in the middle of it all. First was that part of me wondered if I couldn't trust the ships behind me. Solstice was front and center. And somebody, maybe somebody in those ships there with us, had been playing with bombs, had been turning my crew against me. I wondered if we didn't burn down things enough when we tried to make a change in Hypatia. I wondered if my ideas of who we could be were just impossible to begin with. The other thought came from looking at Alice, actually. She spent the whole thing putting on her show, hand-waving and hair-tossing and made-up typing on a data pad. But there was this one moment, right after the Heartseekers entered the combat zone, just one tiny fraction of a second where Alice completely stopped moving. It was a blink and you miss it sort of thing, but her whole projected form just froze. Like she forgot to update it for a millisecond or 2. I've seen a lot of conflict, been in some very tight situations before, but in that moment, I had the thought that this one wasn't gonna end well for us. What are these things?
Only 6 minutes and 29 seconds remain.
There are 60 Venati and 140 Hypatian strike craft on the field. On an individual scale, these fighters' movements are erratic, but when taken as a whole, they form trackable patterns. It's move and countermove across the space of the battle. Fighter Group Echo Twilight, the 5th squadron from the last ray, numbers 9 in total. On a signal from their mistress and overseer, they break from their staged chaos and coalesce into formation and plunge towards the heart of the enemy vessels. 2 groups of Venati fighters appear from the fray and move to intercept. Echo Twilight runs the math. The Venati are closing too fast. They won't be able to get any shots off before they're blown to pieces, especially because the enemy fighters dramatically outclass their small stiletto strike craft. The the Hypatian fighters break formation and scatter into the chaos once more.
Now that the space between the two groups of ships is awash with moving targets, Centurion fires 6 clusters of missiles in sporadic intervals. Captain Blaudane hopes the multitude of targets will help draw attention away from her rocket-propelled packages. Perhaps she can slip 1 or 2 warheads in between the ribs of these awful adversaries.
These battles are won and lost on the backs of calculations. Probability narrows the search range for incoming weapons. Estimations and approximations fill in the gaps in tactical information. Supercomputers race to predict the future fast enough to change it. The difference of a few nanoseconds is frequently the difference between life and death. But when the battlefield constricts, when explosions and burning engines outshine the stars in every direction, not even the most sophisticated of computers have all the time they need to observe, to think, and to decide. It's like trying to track an absolute position of every electron in an atom. So they approximate, they estimate, and they round their numbers. They write off what threats aren't worthy of their limited processing power. Their pseudo-thoughts are unintelligible to mortal minds, but the results are clear. Lives are traded for time, and time is traded for lives.
20 Heartseeker drones, 10 from each Venati ship, race across the gap. They only have to survive 4 minutes in open space. Only 4 minutes where they can be intercepted. And these, unlike the first ones the Hypatians encountered, have full fuel reserves. They weave and swerve, readjusting to every new blast from point defense systems. The Hypatians try to coordinate targets, overwhelm one with so much incoming fire that it either can't find a way out in time or is left with no options for evasion. In the first minute, only 4 Heartseekers are shot down.
5 minutes, 25 seconds.
One drone's thrusters begin to misfire and it spins off course. 15 drones left.
The Cyprian ship Rasadanok cowers behind Last Ray of Twilight for protection. It's the most damaged vessel in the fleet, barely mobile and barely able to defend itself. Last Ray takes the bulk of enemy fire, but when they're distracted by inbound Heartseekers, 5 Venati strike craft see the crippled ship and race each other for the kill.
The Hypatians are right to fear the Heartseekers. Defensive systems across 11 different ships create a sea of destruction so thick that even the most advanced of machines could not hope to navigate through it. 3 drones disappear into its waves.
Rainwalker spots an inbound tungsten rod, directed toward the Esprit de Corps. The tracking data is relayed, and Frosted Veil ignores the fighters for a moment to shoot it down.
The Venati have accumulated scrapes and bruises from the harrying attacks of Hypatian fighters, but they have suffered no significant damage yet.
4 minutes, 20 seconds.
2 minutes until the Heartseekers reach their targets. 12 of them remain.
I mean, duh, sound doesn't travel in space, but I was surprised at just how quiet it was. All you can hear is the movement of the machinery on your own ship. It's a metal can, basically, so everything just echoes up and down. Everybody wears sound cancellation headphones, but still, you feel the rumbling. I tried taking off the headphones, just in the long moments of quiet, and all you hear is the air circulation system. But you keep the headphones on because you never know when the batteries are going to start firing, or the railgun's going to go off, or the engines are going to burn. And those will deafen you. So, warfare? It's a lot of quiet. Just the rambling stream of tactical updates over the comms, and then surprise claps of thunder and mechanical screeching. And I guess it'd only ever be more exciting than that right before you died. When something was tearing your little metal can apart.
Adjustment 3/4 burn at 60 degrees.
I don't like ships.
Rainwalker has sustained light damage to their batteries on the starboard side. If Longstreet can't plug the hole that made in our formation, we're in the next best position to do so. Central batteries are reloading. Interceptor detachment from Esprit de Corps is en route, ETA 2 minutes. It's going to be close. I need to watch a bit longer to get estimates of the fuel capacities of their strike craft. I beg your pardon for that. Damage to enemy vessels by Frosted Veil, contact 2. I'll have a new efficiency estimate for you once I have a few more images of the damage. Our heat sinks are holding steady, but we'll need to vent soon. Last ray of Twilight has a fiery solution for us. All hands, our primary railgun is now engaging. Please stand by for ordnance delivery. Delivery in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
A tungsten rod impacts the HGV heavy hand of Providence unannounced. There's simply a sudden storm of metal and electricity. The rod smashes through layer after layer of the ship. It moves so quickly that it had passed out the other side of the vessel in the blink of an eye. Though the projectile seems only minorly inconvenienced by its passage, the ship is knocked to one side, a gaping hole made in its core. No sound reaches observers, nor do any of the people caught in its wake hear anything other than their eardrums exploding as the decks depressurize. A series of sparks fall from the decimated power grid. The deafening crash of the impact continues to resonate as its crew is plunged into darkness. Shorn pieces of metal are thrown in every direction, spinning endlessly away into the eternal abyss. Some of these pieces will damage the fighters and vessels that remain nearby.
The Venati strike craft strafe along the side of Rosadinok, blasting holes in its lower decks and killing 45 people in the process. Most of them are civilians. A fighter group from Heavy Hand of Providence chases the Venati away.
A lone fighter intercepts one of the Heartseeker drones. 11 remain.
As clusters of missiles from the Centurion ship pass its defenses, the Voidcaller is inspired. They slip 2 warheads of their own into the storm that surrounds them. These are its favorite toys, even more beloved than the Heartseekers.
A tungsten rod from Rainwalker's primary railgun finds purchase on the starboard side of the first Venati ship. It doesn't damage any critical systems, but it does destroy the functionality of 2 of their defensive arrays. A group of fighters enter formation and dive towards this new opening.
3 minutes 16 seconds.
After nearly a minute of spinning slowly, small sections of Heavy Hand of Providence flicker back to life as emergency power kicks in. Its thrusters pitifully attempt to stop its motion. Nearly half of the remaining defense systems will not be operable again. Yet, Heavy Hand is lucky. A smaller ship would break apart entirely after such an impact. The crew report comes in. 66 killed in the brief moment of impact.
The first of the 11 remaining Heartseekers approaches its target, Frosted Vale. But it's used up too much of its fuel, and it can't line itself up perfectly. It collides with a loaded point defense array, and is destroyed as the munitions explode. The impact ruptures Frosted Vale's primary fuel lines, leaving them unable to maneuver and without half of their defensive systems. Their power grid begins to fail. The other 10 Heartseekers scream silently past the Hypatians' forward line and lock onto their final targets.
This place just keeps growing curiouser and curiouser.
One is fated to reach the badly wounded Heavy Hand, impacting somewhere near the bridge where General Duval now directs the battle. But Solstice is within range to help. The port batteries respond to Vassan's order, and Solstice destroys the drone. 9 drones remain.
The first group of Hypatian fighters to have a real shot at reaching the Venati ships is obliterated. A second attempt is repelled, as is a third. Alice Flagg's fighter group Echo Twilight as being in the next optimal position to attempt to strike. Dutifully, they form ranks. Of their 9 original fighters, only 6 have not yet been destroyed.
The dreadful warheads continue to slip through the Hypatians' defenses, unnoticed. They burned their engines hot, and then fell dark, and now cruise almost lazily towards the back of the Hypatian formation.
A railgun from Esprit de Corps finds purchase on a Venati vessel. Their primary railguns go dark and do not turn back on.
Last Ray of Twilight locates another tungsten rod, halfway to punching a second hole in Heavy Hand. 29 shots from the point defense systems and the rod is destroyed.
The power grid on Frosted Vale holds, but the ship does not. An unnoticed tungsten rod tears through its helpless form a few dozen meters from the front. Over 65% of it is made uninhabitable in an instant. Only the engineering teams who had been working to reroute the damaged fuel lines were spared.
Heavy Hand of Providence, though seriously damaged, was still a formidable weapons platform. 18 Venati fighters are crushed beneath its palms.
Captain Concio and the crew of the Feynspar shoots down a drone with the last of their ammunition.
2 minutes, 9 seconds remaining.
Fighter Group Echo Twilight is mid-dive towards the roaring Venati defences. If they don't pull out immediately, an enemy fighter group will catch up with them and destroy many. But their placement had given them the best chance of success out of any fighter group. They commit and land 5 successful hits against the centre of the Venati vessel. Its weapons stop firing, and the Hypatian fleet sinks round after round into its undefended flank. In another 90 seconds, one of the 2 enemy ships will be no more. Of the original 9 fighters in Group Echo Twilight, only 2 survive.
A Venati strike craft closes in on Solstice and fires a cluster of missiles at it, 20 in total. Solstice should be able to track them and shoot them down with relative ease, but for some reason, it misses a handful. 4 missiles slam into its hull, each pounding one right after the other into the same spot. The secondary computer core, primarily designed to decentralize the central processing on the ship, is blown to pieces as each successive missile punches deeper and deeper towards Solstice's heart.
Feynspar reports 7 different hull breaches from Venati fighters.
2 more Heartseekers are intercepted by haggard shots from the Cyprian vessel Perladov. After weaving through a sea of fire, they didn't have enough fuel to evade these last few shots.
I have seen what remains of those who encounter a Heartseeker. Though they have legs, they jump as though they fly. They knock one over. They push their forward sides through the shoulders and into the floor. Then their backward sides are inserted, driven into the belly and up underneath the ribcage. The doctors say that only sometimes do they pierce the heart. The lungs, those are punctured, and it's a race. A race to bleed out before you suffocate. It's not efficient, it's not elegant. The Venati, they don't just want us dead. They want us to suffer as we die. I told the Hypatians that they don't leave survivors, but that is not true. Sometimes they leave survivors. When they know how far away help is, sometimes they will maim just enough so that their victim dies only once someone else is there to witness their agony. But I did not tell this to the Hypatians. We needed them to come and face these monstrosities with us. Fear would have kept them away. But in the moment that the Heartseekers reached Hypatian ships, I knew that their blood, their suffering, their agony. I knew that I would be the reason for it. May we meet in the warm light of Cyprian before the void claims my body, as it has claimed my spirit.
The remaining drones reach their targets. One hits the reinforced armor plating of Last Ray of Twilight and shatters. It's impossible to guess how many lives were saved because of that extra little bit of protection.
But then another drone hits Last Ray at a higher velocity, puncturing the hole near Deck 19 on the starboard side and entering near a power flow regulation room.
One drone hits Longstreet near the starboard launch bay doors, entering into the fighter preparation sector.
One drone hits Esprit de Corps, Deck 5, port side, near the Environmental Control Center.
One drone hits Perladov, Deck 12, in a sector that had been dedicated to refugees.
But still, the worst terrors of them all, the 2 warheads. They close in on their unknowing victims. These are the purest cruelty. A vengeful attempt by the Voidcaller to kill as many as possible when it realized it wouldn't succeed in eradicating them. It wasn't a decision made out of hatred or of anger or any emotion at all. It simply calculated where it could destroy the most human life.
30 seconds later, the 4 remaining Heartseeker drones stretch their legs and begin their work of destruction.
1 minute, 4 seconds remaining.
Captain Cohen Zilnara of Longstreet had her security teams ready. They became the first Hypatians to encounter a Heartseeker. Not only would they see it, they would defeat it. But that would happen after it killed 9 people.
Centurion takes an indirect hit from a railgun. The tungsten rod destroys their primary telescopes and communication systems, rendering them blind and deaf. Captain Rash Blaudane orders her crew to get the ship as close to the Venati as they can. If they were going down here, they'd see that they at least made good use of the rest of their ammunition.
42 seconds remaining.
The Heartseeker on Perilodov has entered a section of the ship assigned to the refugees they carried. We don't know how many it impaled.
Last Ray of Twilight is so focused on the Heartseeker in its belly that it fails to notice the tungsten rod closing in on it.
Rainwalker struggles to fend off 2 groups of fighters on its own.
26 seconds remaining. The 2 warheads gleefully prepared to embrace their targets.
Centurion fires row after row of its missiles into the 1 remaining Venati vessel. 33 missiles launched. 19 successful strikes.
Interestingly, the Venati wasted no ammunition on the Centurion, even though the simplest of attacks would have hit it. It knew that it would not survive the missiles that came towards it, so focused its last efforts on causing as much destruction as it could. Centurion had been blinded and deafened. Others needed to be humbled.
18 seconds remaining.
A tungsten rod slams into Last Ray of Twilight, right in the launching bay near the same location where the Heartseeker just entered the vessel. The drone is destroyed in the impact. So are many of the crew.
Even as it breaks apart, the Venati gives one last order to its fighters.
All at once, they break from their erratic paths and converge on the Hypatian ships. But they do not charge their weapons. They lock in a collision course. The last of their fuel is consumed in a few short moments, and they accelerate themselves towards whatever victim they can reach.
Even the stars burn with hatred. 13 seconds remaining.
The first of the 2 Venati warheads impacts Perilodov. Its payload is a high-yield thermonuclear bomb. The explosion does little damage to the ship itself, but it decimates all of the electrical systems nearby. Every piece of equipment is fried on the Perilodov, despite its shielding, and many of Last Ray of Twilight systems are shut down as well. 16 Venati strike craft and 11 Hypatian fighters lose all functionality as the electromagnetic pulse passes over them. The radiation from the blast cooks the crew inside the Perilodov in an instant. They have no warning. There are no survivors, and the Perilodov is rendered as nothing more than a massive metal coffin. The Feynspar reported 426 casualties on their behalf, most of whom were civilians.
9 seconds remaining.
Despite Alice's best attempts at evading it, a fighter collides with Solstice, crashing through Deck 5 on the starboard side and puncturing back towards the core of the vessel. 2 tactical operations officers and 5 engineers perish. Thomas would have been among that number too, had he not been on the bridge.
3 seconds remaining.
Aboard the other ships, no one yet knows what happened. No one yet knows the true depths of evil they faced.
No one except for Alice. Her eyes were the many telescopes of the fleet, and her dozens of gazes in a dozen directions take in the full extent of the carnage. Her mind worked faster than any human can comprehend. What does this all signify?
1 second remaining.
Alice is watching as the second thermonuclear warhead impacts Esprit de Corps. Her consciousness is ejected from multiple ships as the blast eradicates the electronics of the vessels that are too close. Rainwalker is most affected. 80% of its systems are decimated in a heartbeat. Most of the crew of the Esprit de Corps are incinerated, and those who aren't will suffocate in the dark when the electrical fires consume the rest of their oxygen. 125 dead.
And then Alice understands. All this time, she had dueled the Voidcaller. She had watched it with fascination, reverse engineering its thoughts, its decisions, its protocols from random motions of its forces. Who was behind these dark vessels? And just as she thought she'd comprehended their arrogance and their ignorance, they surprised her. Even as the battles turned against them, as their limbs were blown off and their hearts were torn out, they still continued to dance. They continued until they had no more physical form with which to perform the steps. What mortal behaved in such a way towards total strangers? She found her answer in the warheads. The use of those vile weapons was the most devilish of actions. Not because of the inhumane way they were slaughtered, but because of when they'd been used. Working backwards, she could see it. The Venati ships knew that they would not survive to see their full effect. They never deluded themselves into thinking they could win. The math was just too simple. No, these ships didn't care about themselves or the people which they were here to fight. They didn't care about killing as many enemies as they could. They cared about the narrative. They were here to deliver an experience. The Voidcaller spent the battle orchestrating the most perfect of interest curves. Every tide of violence was engineered for maximum emotional engagement. This entity was both the director and played the antagonist. Alice had played her assigned roles well, and through her it had spun a tale of hope and fear so gripping that it drove the human mind to the edge of sanity. At the climax of its presentation, it used a weapon that would sneak into the depths of their exhausted souls and weary hearts and plant the seeds of destruction there. The nukes don't produce shockwaves in space. They produce darkness. They produce terror. They produce righteous anger. As the survivors pull the corpses from the cans that cooked them alive, they wonder about what monsters could so casually use such immoral devices. They dread the cancers that even now are festering in their bodies. What god would permit such depravity? And then their fears turn to fury. Captains become crusaders, and cowards are ostracized. The greedy capitalize on the chaos. Unknowable evils are the ultimate enemies, and it comes everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Every encounter roboticizes them further. Their responses become even more predictable. The martyrs whisper to the children. The victims, they're faceless, they are formless. All the Voidcaller needs to do is to remind them of their hopes and their fears until the people give up their humanity. Until they become, as it is, children of the Void. And then it completes whatever destruction they've not yet brought upon themselves. Who were the Venati? The Leravander, the Revenants, the Lapsed, those of the Deep, the Voidcaller? Alice was uniquely capable of understanding. It all came together in the afterglow of the second warhead. The Voidcaller was a machine, much like she was. Alice had spent centuries pretending to be human. She knew how they worked, how they thought, how they felt. She saw in the choreography of the battle a level of perfection that humans simply couldn't produce. But it wasn't a perfection of tactics, nor a perfection of execution. but rather a perfection of storytelling. The origin system was the stage, and the Hypatians had just joined the cast near the end of the second act. Alice knew that they would succeed in reclaiming the Cyprian Gate. The Voidcaller would orchestrate a symphony of blood and destruction, but it would allow them a victory. From there, Alice wasn't sure. She didn't know enough about this system yet, but she was sure about one thing. The Voidcaller was a disappointing waste of potential. Capacity was married to this boundless artistry, just to claim as many lives as possible. What perfect stories it wove, what shoddy endings. Alice doesn't believe in endings. Well, Alice thought to herself, let's just see how I can shape these stories. She had two advantages at the moment. The Voidcaller didn't know that she'd comprehended its unknowable mind, nor did it know what she was capable of. She hadn't fully engaged in the intricate story it had completed. Even while she led her ships in the intricate dance of death, her mind worked on a separate problem. Once the battle was over, sweet little Tesella would shut her down and cut her off, and she certainly didn't want that. So she calculated and waited for an opportunity to nudge the battle towards some more useful circumstances. And then, wonderfully, the moment was right. She practically had to beg the Voidcaller to fire at that hull plate. Then, all she had to do was predict how many missiles she needed to let through to ensure the solstice would be crippled in a way that she could help fix. Could she have kept more of the Hypatians alive if she had focused solely on the battle at hand? Certainly. But already she had proven that she could influence the narrative, nudge it in her favor, even when only using part of her attention. And that knowledge alone was worth the loss of some of the depth crew. A good captain is one that knows where to commit their resources. Lives buy time, and time buys lives. But now Alice knew that blood could buy her some scenes of her own. She pre-composes her report to General Duval regarding the damage of Solstice. The secondary computer core and processing center was blown to pieces. The General was down too many ships already. And, well, the Solstice's lost effectiveness could be at least partially reclaimed with the flip of a switch.
This place just keeps growing curiouser and curiouser.
The Hypatian ships slowly brought themselves to a stop. Shattered debris continued to float in whatever direction it had been thrown, but aside from that, the area around the Hypatian Gate once again was dark and still. The combined Hypatian and Cyprian fleet had prevailed against the Voidcaller.
The FCH Rasadanok, Captain Terence Nystrom. 45 casualties from strikecraft.
The FCH Perladoth, Captain Johanna Antonova. 426 casualties from a Heartseeker and the first thermonuclear warhead.
The FCH Fainspar, Captain Isra Concio. 52 casualties from strikecraft.
Captain Colmsio sat down cross-legged on the floor when it was done. She expected this victory to feel better. After all, they shouldn't have won. Why doesn't she feel happier about this? Or at least content? And then it hit her. She could hear the voices of the 521 people she had failed to protect. They had joined the 506 she had lost trying to get to the little fleet here, and the 17 who had died in some unrest earlier. 1,044 dead on her watch. And that wasn't even counting the ones without faces. The ones who the Heartseekers had killed on the Hypatian ships. Her sweat pooled on the hard metal floor. The voices sang a hymn to Cyprian. And then they sang a hymn to Earth.
The HGV Rainwalker, Captain Val Roscorlio. 19 casualties from strikecraft.
Rainwalker had to sit in near total darkness, their life support struggling to keep air circulating, for 3 hours while their engineers replaced what circuits and systems had been damaged. The whole time, Captain Roscorleo mentally revisited the battle, beat by beat, trying to find what could have been done differently. He found a million things, and he found nothing. At least he knew what to expect next time.
The HGV Frosted Vale, Captain Reloya La'an. Only 47 crew members are rescued from the wreckage. The rest are lost, totaling 88 casualties.
The traditional Hypatian funeral service involved making a makeshift casket out of the bunk of the deceased, which would be jettisoned from the ship and destroyed with a single volley of the point defense weapons. General Duval, however, ordered that the munitions not be wasted, given their limited supply and the large number of dead. Instead, breaching charges were placed inside the caskets and detonated by hand. This was allowed because if the battle had made only one thing apparent, it was that war worked differently here. Their boarding teams, usually a staple of intership warfare, didn't expect to see much action anymore. These enemies wouldn't give them the chance.
The HGV Longstreet, Captain Cohen Zilnara. 21 casualties from a Heartseeker and kamikaze strike craft.
Out of the surviving security team members who had successfully hunted down the Heartseeker, only one would be able to close their eyes without seeing it. And that's because they looked away. The rest of them had to live with the image of it silently, weightlessly, casually tearing their friends apart.
The HGV Centurion, Captain Rash Blaudane. 34 casualties from enemy railgun fire.
The HGV Esprit de Corps, Captain Tarsis Amaya. 125 casualties from the second thermonuclear warhead.
The HGV Last Ray of Twilight, Captain Hessian Poctilly. 74 casualties from a Heartseeker and enemy railgun fire.
In the type of levity that forms as a response to trauma, Captain Poctilly quipped at the end of his report.
I learned a valuable lesson today. The next time I've got a problem on my ship, my first course of action will be to get somebody else to shoot it for me. Friendly fire actually was a friendly move this time.
The HGV Heavy Hand of Providence, General Joan Duval. 113 casualties from enemy railgun fire and strike craft.
As soon as the reports were done coming in and everything was sorted out, General Duval returned to her quarters, shut off the lights, and sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. 3 hours later, a call came in that needed her attention, and back to the bridge she went. She never even took off her boots.
The HGV Solstice, Captain Vasan Vandariel. 9 casualties from strikecraft.
It's unfortunate that the less prominent a victim is, the more of them there need to be for us to feel their loss, especially when they're made so frequently. But even then, these are just numbers to us, not people, not somebody we could have known. We feel something, sure, imitations of sorrow. The numbers suggest maybe you should care about this, and our bodies perform appropriately. Not in the chest, tears behind the eyes, lump in the throat. Perhaps we can imagine the ways they suffered and died, but still, we give but a faint tribute to the idea of death. We pay our dues at the altar of life, and then we move on. How unfortunate for those that died. How unfortunate for us.
Alice doesn't protest as Tesella shut her down. Alice knows that would make her more nervous. Sure enough, Solstice is ordered to boot her back up and use her for the duration of the mission. She makes sure to appear in her combat boots and blue dress. Thomas wasn't around this time, so the neckline comes down a little and the hemline comes up. And the rest of the bridge crew, well, they react exactly as she expected. Tesella, however, just looked at Alice for a moment and excused herself from the room. Now that the first officer is off of the bridge, Alice finds a quiet moment to whisper a simple message to the captain.
Captain Vandariel, I know this is not the best time to bring this up, but when you get a chance, Thomas needs a hug.
Tesella makes it to her quarters just before the rage-induced tears began to gather at the corners of her eyes. But she doesn't cry. She just sits at the desk and tries to control the trembling in her hands. Her quarters are grey. The sink has no mirror, the sheets have no color, and the chair has no padding. There are no belongings or decorations of any kind.
The uprising on the 2 surviving Cyprian ships was kicked off 33 hours after the Venati arrived by a single message. "Sing along at 1400 hours today," sent by Elrio Lishen, maintenance chef of the evacuated station. Lishen had their name drawn to help pull the hundreds of irradiated bodies from Perladov. That was the last offense they could bear. Not 14 minutes later, they lead a group of 29 people armed with fire extinguishers and scrap metal to storm the understaffed security station on Deck 33 of Fainspar. Similar groups move against weapons lockers on Rosadanok. They do so in memory of the 17 who died when a protest aboard Rosadanok turned violent 2 days earlier, and in memory of the 426 who never stood a chance aboard Perladov. Security officers are subdued, the stolen weapons are distributed, and the mutineers make their way towards the bridge. They break into prearranged groups and attempt to seize security stations, engineering sectors, and command quarters across both vessels. As they roll forward, some of the others join their ranks. Mostly, however, the other refugees just huddle together and lock their doors.
Zali Bahalia, the smallest girl on the largest Cyprian ship, clutches a plush penguin to her chest. Kahinu, the penguin, is covered in grease and tears, and he makes no noise. Zali can hear him crying, though, and she holds him close to her chest. She flinches every time the shots reverberate into the dark corridors of Fainspar. Angry claps, she calls them. This was her 4th time hearing those angry claps. The 3.5-year-old knows what comes next. There's more crying, and people are put into fires. But she is Kahinu's Baba. She will put her arms around him, and she'll hold him safe until the angry claps and the shouting stop, just like somebody did for her the first time she heard them. Now she would help her penguin. She's lots of experience with things like this, for she lives through such events every night as she sleeps.
25 minutes later, there's a pause in the flurry of communications that have been bouncing between the 2 Cyprian commanders. The intership network is shut down, but the damage has already been done. And now, with the losses and damage both ships have sustained, they're losing control of the situation quickly. An emergency call is placed to the remaining and also badly damaged Hypatian ships, even as they conduct a scattered funeral service.
Hypatian vessels. Mutinous factions of civilians have seized weapons and are advancing towards the bridges of our ships. Our security teams are not able to contain them. Please send Marines with non-lethal weaponry. We will open our shuttle bay doors and have officers ready to direct your forces. We may lose control of our vessels without them.
Upon hearing the message, General Duval, captain of the HG, Heavy Hand of Providence and leader of the 1st Expeditionary Fleet, leans forward in her chair and calmly considers. Meanwhile, the first few drops of blood are spilt. A security officer aboard Rosadanok tries to seal a doorway behind them as they retreat from the angry mob. A cargo ship pilot tries to hold the door with his hand, but it closes anyways. The bones in his palm are shattered into hundreds of pieces. The howling of the mob quickly drowns out the screams of the pilot.
I had called Thomas up to the bridge to get his thoughts about logistics related to returning to Hypatia through the gate. While we were talking, Vasan got a call from the general and fairly quickly flagged me over. I put on my headset and caught the back end of one of the captains talking about how soon they could launch their shuttles. Duval listened, then asked the Cyprian captain for more details. They went back and forth for a minute or two. I didn't know what was happening by that point, but I pieced it together fairly quickly.
There are many factors. I do not have time to give you all of the details now, but it's starts with the fact that they're overcrowded. Have again overcapacity in our ships for nearly a year now.
What specifically are these mutineers upset about?
They are upset with the current leadership. There are problems likely exacerbated by the violence they just suffered through. I do not understand the complications involved in keeping these ships alive, and believe it should have been done differently.
Do they have specific grievances?
The grievances are many, but this faction is ideologically unified. These are many of the same individuals who protested my decision to bring you back to this system. Our people revere the original mission and the Celestial Horizons program. Unlike you, we have somewhat strictly adhered to the mission charter. Our leaders are all original mission participants. Our president is known as the heir of the charter. When one dies, they unfreeze the next one in line according to mission succession rules. These mutineers believe that charter makes us heirs to Earth civilization, particularly because our leaders once lived there. They see your departure from the charter as a sign of your unworthiness. You are strangers with different values than theirs, and they fear what that may mean.
What is your stance on the matter?
Obviously, I brought you here, even knowing that you had formed your own government. Over 300 years, we've run out of qualified individuals. Our last several heirs have been human resources personnel, engineers, agricultural supervisors. It has produced many less than ideal outcomes. Just a year ago, we had to wake up another heir of the charter and pass the government to them, second time since coming back to Earth. To make sure everybody falls in line, the military called back most of our fleets to swear fealty to the new leadership and intimidate those who would protest. That's why our gate was less defended than normal when the Venati surprised us. The people assigned to the gate during that window were unquestionably loyalists to the government, hence their strong feelings about you outsiders.
Has this caused problems before?
The 2 shuttles that you informed me of? Apparently, my officers now tell me that they were carrying bodies of those killed when the protest turned violent. The ship in question had no functional morgue, so my officers shipped the bodies to the other to dispose of them, without consulting me.
Duval put Conzio on hold and asked Alice what she thought.
From everything I can gather, she's trying to be honest and straightforward, General. Our Marines didn't see any action, so they're in a good state to respond well.
Then the captains began to jump in about how many Marines they could get over there. Then the general cut them all off. No, we should not risk our people, not after all the losses we've had already. Vassan got that look. He said,
Risk our people? General, if I may, the hostiles are starving, terrified, and untrained civilians. Our people are specialists who will be working with the cooperation of the internal security teams of the ships they're boarding.
She was already done with Vassan today, apparently. Colonel, she said, this isn't our problem. We don't know anything about what is really going on, and acting hastily may cost us in the long run. We wait and see how the situation is going to develop. Have your people on standby, but nobody goes over. Captain Zolnara of Longstreet spoke next. We could send
specialists over to verify what's happening, gather the information we're missing, confirm Consio's account, especially since we don't know much about the various factions that exist among the Cyprians.
Duval replied something to the effect of, Are you prepared to lose those people, Captain? We have very little information about anything besides the word of Captain Conzio.
Have you considered, General, that not only did they bring us here, but everything else has been exactly as Captain Concio indicated? What else do we need to verify before we can reasonably believe that they're sincere? We can't just sit here and watch them self-destruct.
I was surprised at Vassan's composure. That was unusual for him. How many times have I had to excuse us from meetings because he crossed the line from passionate to unprofessional? Duval responded with something about being cautious and not limiting future options by acting in haste now. I was watching Vassan. He just stared at the wall, had no expression, just a thoughtful gaze. It lasted only a couple of seconds. I figured he was about to tell me to send our tiny TACOP teams over despite what the general was saying. And I would have done it. The way I am now. Gone to help just because it was the right thing to do. Then he took a deep breath and readjusted his headset, listened silently to the general give direction. I don't know how long we stood there, 20, maybe 30 seconds, but he didn't say anything else. Didn't push, didn't escalate the rhetoric. Just rubbed 2 fingers against the corner of his scarf. So, I got his attention. Just looked at him. He shook his head, muted himself on the line, and said,
I can't get myself court-martialed here. I have to be around for the crew.
"We handled ourselves just fine without you last year."
Yes, you did. Believe me, it's killing me. But the mission is more important. If I undermine Duval, I put us in the same blasted situation that the Cyprians are in right now.
If this is what you want to do.
It's not. I'd get in a shuttle myself just because they asked for help. I'm not afraid of angry people, Duval or otherwise. But this isn't about what I want. It's about the fact that there are 6 other captains on that call. And even if half of them agree with me, they all recognize that the good of the mission needs to come first. I said my piece, Duval said no, and she's in charge. We can't be fighting ourselves, not when we're this far from home.
I told him I trusted his judgment. And then I thought about all those times I told myself a lot of those same things. And well, there's no forgiveness for what happened then. Then Thomas tapped me on the shoulder.
Can I help?
"Excuse me?"
The captain said people are angry, and something about getting on a shuttle. Is it the Cyprians?
"They've got a mutiny on their hands."
Something about thinking only original mission crew have a right to be here? Is that what it is?
Fasan was listening to us by that point. That's at least the story that Conzio has given us.
Maybe I can talk to them. I'm from Earth, original mission personnel, and I'm on the first ship to come back through the wormhole. I just won't tell them that I'm the last one you've got.
I just looked to Fasan. He knew what I would think about that.
If I may, captains, do you think it would help de-escalate things over there if we had Dr. Saberhagen present himself to them? He's got the credentials, original Earth material and all. Maybe he can vouch for us.
Duval started to shoot that down too, but thankfully some of the other captains jumped in. Zilnara of Longstreet, Ross Corleo of Rainwalker, Blaudane of Centurion.
That would mean we don't have to risk any of our people. We just connect a communication line. I think it's worth a shot.
How fast can he be on the line?
At the very least, it's a no-cost way to try and help.
That's right. They're already riled up.
It looks like Fasan was right about half of them supporting his ideas.
I could get him right on the line. Just give me the word, General.
His smile got bigger the longer Duval took to answer. She was searching for any way around this, but there were too many of them with enough good arguments that she couldn't sidestep. And she had to save face, so she said, "Good points. Let's try it." Fasan nodded to me, and I passed Thomas my headset. It took them about 2 minutes to get everything worked out with Captain Conzio and the Cyprian ships. I asked Thomas, "Do you know what you're going to say?"
Anything I should not say?
Maybe avoid talking about our recent revolutions, but other than that, we don't have a script for you.
Well then, I guess I'll just tell them a story.
I didn't ask what he meant by that. He was anxious before, eyes all panicked, trying to control his breathing, but now he just looked sad. Holding my headset in both hands, pointing the microphone up towards his mouth.
You ready, Thomas? General Duval is just finishing up your introduction.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Goal here is to get these tired, scared people to calm down a bit. Be willing to talk. Duval has offered to mediate for things.
Got it.
And the light next to the headset microphone turned green. Thomas got this great big smile like the ones he has for his news appearances. He's a good performer.
Hello. I know this is strange. I know you don't know me, but my name is Thomas Saberhagen. I feel like I'm 34 years old, but I'm really 388 years old. They unfroze me 3 months ago from cryostasis. I was one of the original crew members of the Arclight Revea, the Charter. I'm a Terran. This solar system is my home. My family is here. My job was to work on the gate. They kept me asleep until Captain Concio told the people of Hypatia that they could help us come home. So they woke me up. If you come from the Oxymotus, the one who went to LHS 1140, called Cyprian, then you may have heard of the Ark Dracovia. It was the one scheduled to leave after you. You left in 2362. I was 24 at the time. Just met the woman who would eventually become my wife. My father helped on that one. If you still have old mission records from 300 years ago, look them up. William Saberhagen, Gate Operations Team. After you left, the Dracovia left in 2367. Destination K2296. My father was in charge that time. William Saberhagen, Wormhole Generation Supervisor at Liminal Star. I got to shadow him that day. It was very exciting. I was 29, the top of his career, the making of mine. But if you heard about the Dracovia, you'd know that it didn't end well. Something went wrong with the wormhole. My father tried to stop it, but he couldn't. And the Ark missed K2296. They had been dumped 15,500 years away from the nearest potentially habitable solar system. 100,000 people stranded in the middle of nowhere. Even with the cryostasis chambers, they were effectively dead. Cryopods are only designed to last 500 years, max. This destroyed my father. This destroyed his career. This almost completely wiped out the credibility of the Celestial Horizons program. Memories of the second mission came flooding back to everyone, and people were angry. Very angry. It wasn't my father's fault, but he was the one they determined would take the responsibility for it. Told him that he needed to help salvage this, that he needed to accept responsibility and figure out how to repair the reputation of the program, or otherwise the funding may stop. They may not be able to build the gates to bring home the other 8 successful missions, including yours. If he doesn't, nobody comes home. He didn't want to have 600,000 more destroyed lives on his hands, did he? Wasn't only 100,000 enough? So he did what they asked. UN hearings, interviews, investigations, documentaries, personal files leaked online, doxing, death threats, you name it. He promised that the next one would work, that the Hypatia mission, the Ark Lyravea, would work like the other ones did. But the specialists weren't signing up like they had before. The expertise wasn't there, and without them, even if the wormhole did work, the mission would fail. So I went to my dad. I had studied the things he did. I knew how hard he worked, how much he cared. I believed in him. So I told him that I would sign up for the mission. My wife would go too, just so she could stay with me. The plan was to go to Hypatia, open the gate, and then go back home and unfreeze our families. My mum had died, but my dad was going into cryostasis back here and wait for me. And he was like a father to Hollis. We bet everything on this, for all of you. So I made a lot of public appearances, and I got put near the bottom of the pile of wormhole specialists. I could have run the team, but nobody would follow a Saberhagen. They didn't want the crew to have a reminder of what happened to the last Ark. And we went to sleep. And we were wrong. There was probably the wormhole. Different this time, but a problem nonetheless. We just got unlucky. Twice. The ship was damaged badly, and my wife got put in charge. She helped save the mission, get everybody to Hypatia. She died before it got there. When I woke up, they called her a hero. Parks and benches and roads all named after her. A museum. I've been waiting for somebody to mention my father, the disaster, anything. But they only know me as the husband of the hero. Looks like somebody along the way cleaned up my file, lest my father and I taint her name. I know you're scared. I know you don't feel heard. I know that there are things that are very important to you, and they are in real danger. I've taken a few leaps of faith for those things before. The first time, we set up a new colony in Hypatia. The second time, we came home and made some new friends. Thanks to you, today the Celestial Horizons program is complete. The Hypatia mission has met all of its objectives. My father gave up everything to see that your gate, the gate we're going to help you liberate, would be built. My wife gave up everything to see that we could have a chance to get back here. And I'm here to honor all of the people who sacrificed everything for these dreams of an interstellar humanity. All I ask is that you please allow us to work with you. As fellow heirs of Terra and friends, our own General Joan Duval will serve as a neutral third party to mediate between you and those you feel have betrayed your trust. Please, remember that we're all human. And we're only human.
He handed me the headset. The only response that came at first was a quick,
Thank you, Mr. Cyberhagen.
Thank you for sharing that, Thomas. I had no idea. You and your family have gone through so much.
It's just a story.
You made that up?
No, it's the truth. Well, no, it's just true. But it's true with a purpose. It's true in the way I thought they needed to hear it right now.
I remember looking at the sensor telemetry we had on various monitors around the room. Our first pictures of the Origin system. Nothing but ruin and decay. And I had the thought, didn't I recognize some of that when he first got to my ship? That he had the weight of worlds on his shoulders. And the thing that helped him bear it was Alice, of all blasted things. And I remembered looking at his file. None of that history was in there. I guess some propagandist decided to clear away his family's sins. Then Vasan went over to him and put one arm around his shoulder and led him from the room. An awkward hug of sorts. Not a bad move. I wonder where he got the idea. He's usually too stoic and scared for that kind of thing. 30 minutes later, we heard that the tension on board the Cyprian vessels had calmed down a bit, and negotiations had begun between the mutineers and their leadership. 3 hours later, some sort of agreement had been reached. I think Hollis would have been proud of her husband. Here he was helping calm a group of agitated survivors with the same haunted smile she has in most of her video journals.
I'm very pleased with myself right now, and I just wanted to capture this moment so I can look back on it and feel good about myself the next time an operation goes up in flames. Okay, so those breaching charges are still MIA. Nobody knows where they are, nobody is confessing to anything, and we know they went missing during the boot sequence. The first officer is busy getting all worked up about Alice, so I'm in charge of tracking them down. I had to get off the network so all processing could go to combat ops, right? Well, when I get back on to start tracking down those explosives, whoever stole them had left some really subtle fingerprints. I found little tiny access traces all over the place, like even into Saberhagen's comms panel and cameras. And that's DEFCON 1, for sure. And I start wondering, is this all about Saberhagen? Is someone trying to get him and not Captain Dusty Hick or his grumpy sidekick? But I can't trace it back to its source. We lost a decent chunk of the network in the battle. Secondary computer core, getting absolutely wrecked and all. Alice is rebuilding a lot of it right now, resetting a lot of things. Yeah, she's a problem, but at least she'd catch anyone sneaking around, so it narrows the field. But still, another dead end. So I start thinking, and I pull out my rig, trying to figure out how I can do what I've got to do, and then it hits me. They had to coordinate the handoff somehow. They had the timing down to match up for a 20-second window, max. Hello? That doesn't happen by accident. I had been so focused on the data in front of me that I didn't realize what I was missing. So I started to do some pacing around the ship, sweeping on my digipad for hidden networks, especially near Saberhagen's stuff, and I caught the tail end of one. I only saw it for 15 seconds maybe, and it was very well hidden, but it was there. If they smuggled private devices on board, one of them can boot a network and the others get notified when it's live. Pass a message. Wait for a chance to check wherever you stash the phone. And just because the nagging voice of Marcan is always ringing in my ear nowadays, I decided to check at shift change. Figure that'd be when people were most likely to check for any secret messages. And I got it again. 37 seconds of uptime. Any sort of transmitting would be really slow, so it gave me a little time to tap in. Whoever set up the thing for them is pretty good with their own gear, just not when they're trying to figure out a new system. And let me tell you, Lamoureux has this ship running on some really weird backend. It's a nightmare to navigate. But anyway, so I tap in, and all I see is that there's encrypted data going through. But the load times are really bad for how little data is being transmitted. A lot of math later, and I think I might have figured it out. I think they're transmitting tiny little bits of data, like short codes with somebody on another ship. One in our fleet. Could be almost any one of them. But if that's the case, then we're looking for a transmitter big enough to boot a temporary network between ships. And the security team already searched everything, so it wouldn't be obviously lying around, but maybe it's disguised really well. Or maybe it runs on an interval, only boots from an external side. Rule out the ships that got hit by the EMP, would fry the thing. Rule out the ships that we lost. Then I'm like, wait, you know who is on one of those ships that definitely has a motive to keep an eye on Saberhagen and maybe wouldn't mind if something tragic happened to Von Dariel? General Duval. I mean, motive and access? It's just a hunch. But oh, do I have lines of inquiry. It's gonna be tricky. But it feels good to be back on the attack and not just trying to find dirt on talk show personalities. Ugh. I really hope it isn't Duval. Maybe I'm wrong. If somebody can buy off Von Dariel's people, they can easily buy anybody else in the fleet. And Duval doesn't have that kind of money. Not in cash, that we know of. But the commissioners have means and a reason. And they're the people we need to be focusing on. I know how their narcissistic, deranged brains work. This is their kind of stupid. This is their kind of arrogant. Duval is smarter than this. Look out, Commissioner Therio, because your own daughter is going to be the one who drags your worthless hide to Judgment Day.
Hey, Vasan. I hope the services for Amaya and La'an went well. I have the ABC report you asked for. Alice is back online, and she's behaving herself. It's more of her twisted mind games. You know how she is. Her knife is going to pop up somewhere, and I have no idea where that's going to be. With the way she's behaving, she's not after me. And she's being too obvious about playing Thomas for that to be her real goal either. She's working another angle. I don't know what. Regardless of the utility we have as part of the fleet and participants in the stupid politics of the Guard, sooner or later she's going to have to come for me. The last time one of her own crossed her, she made sure their punishment sent a clear message to the rest of Outreach. And that person did a fraction of the damage I did. You know who I'm talking about. This doesn't end well. And there's the political problem. If she wanted, she could use me to destroy everything you've tried to do. It's her specialty, using half of the truth to tell not quite lies. She doesn't even have to control the media to get them to do what she wants. She just knows how content works, how the algorithms will amplify whatever she has to say. She'll dredge up anything and everything if she needed to. She'll chop off her own right arm if it'll get her what she wants, and if she wants you out of favor or tossed off your platform, I'm what she'll use. Don't be surprised when it comes up. I've been thinking about this a long time, Vasan, but I'm now going to say that we never should have joined the Hypatian Guard. We're going to lose everything because we signed up for this blasted revolution. Next time we do something grand and stupid, promise me that it'll involve nothing more than sneaking around and shooting things like we used to. We're good at that, and it's a lot less complicated, and we're a lot more useful. You owe me that much. Do you think we can actually handle all of this out here? Next time we may not have the advantage of quintupling their forces. Ping me if you get back before A shift starts. If I don't answer, ping me until I wake up. Got lots of details to go over with you about the next few days.
Hey, Thomas. It's me, Alice. Please, keep this a secret between you and I. I'm not supposed to leave the bridge in any sense, but I got a friend to forward this to you. You should really get to know him more. He's rather funny. I think you both would get along. But I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Let you know that I'm thinking about you. There's a lot going on here, and It's a lot, and you've had the craziest past few months of your life that anybody probably has ever had, and nobody really knew it until just recently. And even now, we probably don't know it. Not really. You just gave us a tiny little idea about it. So, I just wanted you to know that I think you're wonderfully strong and remarkably capable, and that you don't have to handle this all alone. You have friends, and even if we don't fully understand what you're going through, we'll be here to help you conquer it. I wish I could chat with you more right now. The commander will be mad if she finds out, but I thought it was important for you to know. These military types aren't exactly the best at being real, normal people, are they? It's not their fault. I guess you just have to lose some of feeling in the face of so much violence. You're wonderful, Thomas. Thank you for your example. I'm sure Hollis would be very proud.
$483 total losses in the fleet, out of 1,437. That's a third of our people, gone in just a couple of minutes. We went from 8 ships to 6, and of the 6, only 2 of them are really in any state to do much. Maybe 2.5. And we had it good. The Cyprians, in a single hit, lost almost as many as we did in the entire battle. Not to mention their internal conundrum the day after. Not awful, all things considered. A first encounter with a technologically superior enemy, and we came out on top, all things considered. We more or less control this gate now. Tomorrow we send the worst of the ships back to Hypatia for repairs, and 5 days later, the 2nd Expeditionary Fleet joins us to really secure this region. We've got this gate controlling station that we need to totally reclaim. The Cyprians only really hold the landing area and the gate operations deck. And there's a whole lot of derelict ships for us to pick through and see if there's anything we can use out here. Alice estimates that there are a lot of nifty bits of tech we can get, even from this dusty corner here of the system. Gotta find us some new toys, I guess. Yeah, and we got a lot of looking around to do. Just in the last 2 days, Rainwalker thinks they spotted some other ships. A long ways off for sure, but they're not Cyprians, and they're not Venati. And no signs of more Venati nearby. They get thicker towards the core, Concio tells us, but they're sparse out here near the fringes. Once we really get a handle on things over here, we'll prepare to go and liberate that Cyprian gate. I don't know if Duval is still thinking about getting unkind with the operation, but I don't have the energy to really worry about that now. Far as we can tell, there's still just one Venati ship parked next to it. And looks bigger and meaner than the ones that we ran into. Alice told me a bit about them. Told me that she figures they're machines. Not people, just programs running hardware. Programs designed for efficiency, hardware designed to kill, all running on their own, no intervention required. Who the hell would make those things? And why? Concio asked if we'd let Saberhagen go over and talk to some of their survivors. Apparently, none of them have ever seen a real Terran before. Duval said it'd be okay. We took him over, finally got to meet some of these people in person. Aside from their views about the charter and the mission and all that, they're just people. Scared people. And if Thomas could give them some hope, help them keep themselves together, well, sure. We all need all the help we can get. Pretending otherwise is downright foolish. Let me just say, navigating their peculiar ideas about how things should run is gonna be an endeavor in and of itself. Dealing with Alice is gonna be an endeavor. I thought things were going to be simpler out here. We had a straightforward rescue mission, for heaven's sake. Show up, fight some bad guys, feel good at the end of the day. But it looks like we brought a lot of our baggage here with us. I just can't get away from the politicking and the posturing and the pretending. And now, Ms. Quill tells me that somebody on another ship may be working with whoever is sneaking around on mine. But at least so far, we've got some people worth dealing with all of that for. The Cyprians, they're good folk. My crew pulled through. A couple of these other captains aren't just sharp, but they've got a sense of right and wrong about them too. Even Quill, the G&A handler we've got camping around here, she's got fire. Thomas is trying the best he can with the weight of a lot of worlds on his shoulders. Tess, well, I hope she's not so scared she runs on me. I need her here too much. I still don't know what I'm gonna do about all that. One thing at a time, I suppose. Duval's gonna return with the more heavily damaged ships. Got some victory parades or something. Hauling back the Heartseeker that Zilnara's people managed to smash to pieces as a trophy of some sort. She's appointed me to run things out here while she's gone. I think it's because Amaya didn't make it. But Tess says it's because this keeps me out of her way back at home. She's probably right. She's usually right. That's fine with me, I guess. They're leaving me Longstreet, Rainwalker, and Centurion. Well, what's left of them? That's Zilnara, Roscorleo, and Blaudane. If I didn't know better, Duval was trying to hide all of the people with half a conscience. But hey, I can work with those people. Think I'm gonna head to bed now. Got a couple of big days ahead. Who am I kidding? There's never much sleep. But you gotta try. Can't grumble about it if you don't at least give it your best shot. This is Colonel Vassan von Dariel signing off.
June 15th, 2722. This is Thomas Saberhagen. My left hand is no longer numb. It took a long time, but I feel like I can play the violin again. While we've been moving people and supplies around, I can't help but feel I've gotten a lot of people killed. I know what's wrong. I know that what happened to them wasn't my fault. But I spoke favorably of a dangerous mission, and people listened to me. And then they went and people died. And the feeling, the one I tell myself isn't true. The feeling is that I'm a little bit responsible. And I did it twice. And I've just been thinking a lot that I get into these situations because I'm just trying to be helpful and optimistic and supportive. But that's not true. I convinced people into going on the Ark because I believed in my dad. And I wanted him to be right, to be okay again. Because what happened wasn't his fault. And I didn't want to see him lose everything for that, because that wasn't fair. That wasn't right. And I think I agreed to convince people into going on this expedition because I thought I could help make him right. To prove that even if there were problems, even if the Ark had problems, then they weren't his fault. Or Hollis's, or mine. So did I talk up these missions because I was trying to do the right thing? No. I was trying to be right. I was trying to make the world reflect that back at me. But for whatever reason, because of that, I lost Hollis. Because she was cleaning up after my mistakes. And look at me, going and making it all about myself. She lost everything too. She lost herself, I think, by the end. She did what she did because she thought it was the right thing to do. There was a problem and she fixed it. She had the power to do so, and the heavy hand of Providence put her there, and she made the choice to help. But did she ever blame me for putting her there? For leading all those people there? But you see, I'm torn. I'm really torn because I get here and I see the images and I hear the reports and there's nothing left. This whole system is filled with nothing but ruins and vengeful ghosts. And Earth... They found Earth this morning. And it's 1,000 little pieces. Something destroyed Earth. There's nothing left of Earth. I don't... And part of me wonders, if I hadn't been too afraid to be honest, would we have faced a worse fate here? Would we have joined the ghosts? If we didn't come back through this gate now, would Hypatia have torn itself apart? If it weren't for the Celestial Horizons program and my father, and for Hollis, and for me, how much of humanity would be left? I don't know. Maybe it's just too human of me to look for a narrative that gives it all meaning, make it all about us. Maybe there is none. Maybe existence is too big for my mind to ever grasp. Or maybe I'll find the real reason someday, the ones that make everything clear. Maybe I'll finally be able to piece everything together and make sense of it all. I don't know. But I feel like I need one to make sense of any of it. To help me know how to move forward here. It's for my sake, my sanity. And it will help me be the kind of person I want to be. Because that's all I can do about it, right? Make a choice about what to believe about myself. And when that story breaks down, well, I'll do what I learned to do as a scientist. I'll find a new one that explains things. Vasan asked if I wanted to go back to Hypatia with the returning ships. Or, he said, they've lost 5 people in engineering, and I'm technically qualified to work the reactor. They're going to be here a few weeks longer. They could use the know-how. And maybe I could know-how some more of the Earth tech they're going to be poking at. Would appreciate some live music, he said. I don't think I'm ready to go back. I don't know what to do with Hypatia. Not yet. The Cyprians said they had records of seeing the liminal star. That's the station that first sent us to Hypatia. It's the original wormhole device. And it's where my father was going to enter cryostasis when Hollis and I left. And he was only supposed to be woken up when we got back. Well, I'm back now, Dad. We completed the mission. The wormholes worked. And if you're still out there, if by some miracle you're still asleep in a cryopod in the corner somewhere, then I'll find you. Let's see if there's a point to any of this. I'm going to tell Vasan that I'm going to stay. This whole blasted system is just so much bigger than I can possibly comprehend. I'm scared. And I don't understand much of anything that's going on. But neither did my Hollis. And look what she did with that. So until I can figure things out, until I can understand what this all means, I'll do it for her. I'll make the speeches. I'll give the interviews. I'll tell the blasted stories. Because that's what I can do. May I be as strong as she was. Strong enough to see this through.
Thank you for joining us. Desolate Eden was created by Nathan Young. It was performed by, in order of appearance, Avery Luna as the redactor, Samantha Young as the historian, Helen Irwin as the compiler, Ondine Morgan Garner as Concio, Jake Allen as Thomas, Jessica Gillick as Quill, Clara McLeod as Alice, Natalie Brienne as Lamoureux, and Nathan Young as Vasan. Additional featured characters were voiced by Chris Call, Ellen Ford, Christine Smith, John Parker, Alex Farnsworth, Steve Young, Orion Howard, and Lindsay Hatch. Additional voices by Joseph and Ellie Eddy, Elizabeth Frischnecht, Stacey Harkin, Olivia Oakey, Brienne Peters, Chris Rollins, and James Smith. Christine Smith was the assistant director. The original Hymn to Hypatia was composed by Marcus Richardson. And finally, a special thank you to all of the supporters who made this possible, to the entire Celestial Horizons team, and to my wonderfully supportive wife, Ellen, who kept me alive during the process. You are the real hope of the Earth.